Hello, and thank you for attending my presentation on managed rotational grazing for the Rockbridge Area Conservation Council. I'm going to make this recording in 3-4 parts, and that way it's easier to transmit and share, so I ask that you watch all of them and get the whole picture of what we're talking about. So right there you see on our farm Autumn and our calf, I believe that's Junebug, and he was just born, and the grass they stand in. That picture was taken, she usually calves in April or May, so that's a late April, early May picture. Here's the agenda for our talk today. I'm going to tell you about our farm. We're going to talk about infrastructure. We're going to talk about why people seem to have problems with cows as a way to grow food. We're going to talk about some other options. You know, there's not just two choices. We'll talk about how we do rotational grazing on our farm. And then most importantly, we're going to talk about what some really smart folks say. And this is done on a lot of small farms, but could we do it nationally? That's the question. So here's our farm. We're 5 miles west of Lexington. Just come out West Midland Trail, and you'll find us just past the green box dumpsters. There's our land. We've got currently 8 milking cows and 4 future milkers. Our farm will top out at 12 cows. We keep a couple of bulls. The offspring are either sold for milkers for someone else or used for beef. We've also got turkeys and sheep and goats and pigs and just sort of all the assorted things that you would expect to see on a small farm. And we run a little bit of market garden operation. We operate the Kerrs Creek Community Market off of our farm. And currently 2 generations of my family live there, and a 3rd one is on the way. So we are very, very blessed. Now when we talk about food and agriculture, sure we can talk about an individual farm. But we are really talking about one of the 16 critical infrastructure sectors in the United States. Now, I like to say that food and ag is the Rodney Dangerfield of critical infrastructure because it just doesn't get no respect. Now, any of these other systems, when they fail, you tend to know it immediately. When the electricity goes out, you know the electricity went out right away. When the water stops working, you know the water stops working right away. Right? So food and ag goes different. When something happens within the food and agricultural infrastructure, it could be months before you see the response. Now, sometimes it's sooner than that, but you know, there's always food in the freezer. There's always something else you can eat. There's always a little bit of elasticity in that system. It's one of the differences between this sector and some of the others. Now, here's the sector. I think this is from 2017, but it doesn't change that much. This thing is huge. $1.9 trillion is probably more than that right now of our gross domestic product associated with food and agriculture. Over 100,000 supermarkets, 900,000 and change restaurants, institutional food establishments. Look at that registered and foreign food facilities. 81,000 in the United States, 115,000 outside of the United States that are registered with the FDA. And just before we recorded this, you recall that there was a disruption in the avocado supply from Mexico because there was a problem with someone threatening a USDA or an FDA inspector there. 2.1 million farms, give or take. 915 billion acres of farmland. It's a huge amount of land. And so when we talk about this sector, this is what we are talking about. And it is because of this fact that when someone says, oh, all you have to do is fill in the blank, it doesn't matter what it is, just fill in the blank with whatever. No, it's not that simple. It is not that simple. So if we're going to think about something that big, we need some thinking frameworks. So here's 2 that are available. First is the infrastructure component model. Every infrastructure, I don't care what kind it is, water, electricity, food, doesn't matter, has 6 functions or components. Generation, where we make all the things we're going to use. Bulk transmission, where we move large quantities, long distances with limited access, where we don't connect directly to people. The distribution system, which moves small quantities, short distances, and connects to the user, is a different type of function. And then finally the use. The use is the most important part. Somebody wants it, and somebody's going to pay for it. Sometimes that's the same person. Sometimes that's a different person, but that's why we do this. Every infrastructure produces waste. We'd like to repurpose it, recycle it, and reuse it, but very often we stick it in a hole in the ground. And finally, there's the entire system of coordination and control that allows us to manage this big, huge system together. And we also have to think about the operational environment. This isn't the infrastructure, this is where we put the infrastructure. It's all the things that shape the infrastructure. First is political dimension. Right? That's how we make collective decisions in the United States. We got public health and safety because everything's going to impact that in some way, shape, or form. We have an economic dimension because all of this is part of our economy, and remember that part about somebody's got to pay. We have a social dimension. How do we want things to work? How do we live? What do we want our society to look like? How are we going to interact with each other? The information dimension is how we talk about things. How does this discussion play out in our media, in our conversations, in our talking with each other? There's the infrastructure, which is the physical backbone that allows us to send all of these things from point A to point B. Finally, physical environment, we have to consider that, especially in farming. We live in Virginia. Average rainfall here is 44 inches a year. I used to live in a part of Kansas where the average rainfall was 14 inches per year. We joked in Kansas that a 3-inch rain meant 3 inches between where the raindrops hit the ground. Right? So physical environment changes. And what works in one environment may not work in another environment. You may have to do it entirely differently. If you'd like some more information on infrastructure modeling, if you look up TR 14-14, Infrastructure and the Operational Art, just put that into your search engine and you'll find about 150 pages written that explains these models and a whole bunch of others that can help you think about infrastructure. Now, when we talk about beef production, sort of on the extreme ends of beef production, we have two models, the commodity model and the direct marketing model. Commodity model starts with the cow-calf farm where we make calves, then we take them to the sale barn, and then a shipper moves them to a feed lot, and then there's a feed supplier that puts feed in the feed lot, and then there's a bulk purchaser that amalgamates all these cows and puts them on another shipper, takes them to a processor where they get turned into beef, takes them to a warehouser, takes them to a distributor, takes them to the grocery store, and takes them back to the customer. And that customer might actually be the cow-calf farm that started the process, or his neighbor. Then on the other end, the smallest possible model would be the direct model, which is farm to butcher to customer. Right? Usually moved by the farmer, touched by about 2 sets of hands. And there's all sorts of things that can happen in between there. But again, if we're going to talk about beef production, we've actually got to think that we have these two extremes and everything in between as to what we're going to do. Very often we talk about one little part of this model and we forget everything else. All right? But we need the entire model to be able to deliver food to our customers. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back one slide because I forgot something. Social. Very, very important when we talk about food. 50% of the population in the United States lives in 140 of our 3,300 and some odd counties. 80% of our population lives in like 487 counties, give or take a few. 80% of our population at the national level and at each of our states lives in 20% of our land. I'll say that again. 80% of our population lives in 20% of our land. And we have to remember this when we're talking about food, because we have to feed those people. 80% of the population and 20% of the land. All right, I'm going to end this first video. I'm going to end it right here, and I'll come back here on the second one.